Hello, and welcome to this Christmas special of Creative Minds. So, I'm taking a little break from the main channel videos, and what I wanted to do in this video was to give the people who are kind of coming behind the scenes a bit to the second channel, or maybe you picked up this on the newsletter or the Patreon, to give you some kind of extra material with a slightly different tone. But we're going to be doing expect something, an exploration of a deep and interesting creative principle in hopefully quite a deep and complex way, using a reading from this book, which I covered on my most recent main channel video. So the thing that I want to explore here is something that can massively limit artistic work, and something that the artist is gonna, over time, perhaps get better at addressing in their work. And it's the struggle of the limited human psyche, the individual human experience, to be able to fully realize in our creative work the reality that other people's experiences are, although they're not us, they are actually as full and real, and they're having as deep an experience of lives as ourselves. So what Saunders explores here is that often when people are more similar to us, right, in whatever way you want to say, whether that's look, class, race, I don't know. I mean, it gets way more complex than that in terms of what divides people, right? But what Saunders is kind of getting at, and again, we're going to jump to the reading where he says it in a really interesting way, is that when we're exploring people in our work, and this doesn't just go for fiction, this can go for a lot of different mediums. When we're exploring other people who aren't similar to us, it can be easier and easier to simplify their experience and kind of explore them as characters in a way that doesn't make that jump of getting out of our own individual psyches and representing their reality as deep and complex as our own. So I'm going to jump into the reading now, and I'll be coming back at the end. I hope you're having a good time over the holidays. The holidays, I don't know, more and more I'm realising, more and more I think, and this goes for most people, I think, you realise that Christmas is a really happy time, but it's also, I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and he came out with an interesting phrase, which is these kind of times of years can be an amplifier. So they can be, if you're in a good space, they can amplify that good space, and if you're not in a good space, or if you're whatever space you're in, they can amplify the emotional tone of that space as well, and then pile on top, the beautiful but complicated thing, around people and how they deal with their families, and again, we're addressing Tolstoy here, so we may as well use Tolstoy's quote from I think it's the first line in Anna Karenina, and it's something, I'll probably skew it here, but it's something like, all happy families are happy in the same way, and all unhappy families are unhappy in different ways. And that's a skewing, but we see what he's getting at there. I'm not trying to bring a downer here. I'm just trying to say this is a complex time for a lot of people. It has a lot of beauty, but it also has that amplifying nature. Hope you're having a good one, and with that said, let's jump into the reading. Just have to get my own face off the screen. Right, let's get into this. The story that Saunders is analysing is called Master and Man. I didn't want to sully my celebration of Master and Man back there in the body of my essay by raising a slight quibble I've always had with the story. But let me raise it now. In section, and Saunders uses Roman numerals here, so I don't know Roman numerals straight up like this. So let's say in section 5 we watch Vasily. Vasily is the landlord, so the richer man, work through the fact of his possible coming death. In section 6 it's Nikita's turn, Nikita being the peasant. Abandoned by Vasily, Nikita briefly becomes frightened, but he prays and is immediately comforted by the notion that, quote, he was not alone, but there was one who heard him and would not abandon him, close quote. Beginning to lose consciousness, he feels equally prepared for sleep or death. Nikita takes the notion of his own possible death in stride because he had open quote, always felt himself dependent on the chief master who had sent him into his life, quote, close quote. As for his sins, well, that's how God made him. As for Vasily, Nikita thinks charitably, I expect you're sorry yourself that you started out, dear man. That was a quote, sorry. And, open quote, it would seem hard to leave a life such as his, close quote. This section strikes me as less interesting, less detailed. Nikita seems too good to be true. The emotion a real person like Nikita would experience, a real person, in the face of death, feels like it's being suppressed by Tolstoy's desire to make some sort of ideal peasant. Nikita's not afraid of death because he's so simple, selfless and authentic. His fears are soothed by the mere thought of God. This sets him up in opposition to Vasily, that neurotic, complicated, faithless, terrified landlord. But surely there were peasants who were not simple, peasants who were neurotic, peasants who, simple or not, were terrified of death, peasants who did not believe in God because peasants were, after all, people, not peasants. In other words, I feel that Tolstoy may have a touch of that which he accuses Vasily of, a failure to regard Nikita as a full human being. Fast forward to the last section of the story. Warmed by Vasily, Nikita lives. He's dug out the next day, surprised that in the other world peasants should be shouting in the same old way. When he realises he's still alive, he's not happy about it, but sorry, especially when he finds that he has frostbite in both feet. In the final paragraph, we leap ahead 20 years and may find ourselves wondering, what did Nikita do with those 20 years, the time Vasily's sacrifice won for him? Well, it turns out not much, or more of the same. How did that night change him? Saunders asks. It seems it didn't. Just before Nikita dies, so this is in the kind of epilogue 20 years later, he asks his wife forgiveness and forgives her relationship with the Cooper, which implies that he hasn't done these things previously. He didn't 20 years ago hobble home from the hospital, feet bandaged, full of Vasily's inspired compassion, and set things right. Because we aren't told otherwise, we assume that he's just gone back to his usual ways, being kind to animals and occasionally attacking his wife's clothes with an axe and so on. We never see Nikita wondering about that crazy night at the sled. He doesn't reflect on Vasily's cowardice or his redemption, never asks, why did my master do that, or what happened to him there at the end. Vasily felt that he and Nikita had merged into one person, but Nikita not so much. He doesn't seem grateful to Vasily. He doesn't think of Vasily at all. which is strange. If a person gives his life to save another person and the saved person never thinks about it, doesn't appear grateful, seems unchanged by it? It makes us wonder what is the value of the sacrifice. It also makes us wonder about the person saved. It also makes us wonder about the writer or artist, we could think, if we work in other formats. As Vasily died, we got to witness his last moments in an inner dialogue, in an inner monologue that closes its section. When Nikita's time comes, we get the bare facts of his death, but nothing about what he felt or thought as he died. A scrim gets put up and we're told that we'll have to wait. I don't know what a scrim is. If anyone knows what a scrim is, whack it in the comments, eh? I've never come across that word. I guess it means like a screen or something. I'm not sure at all, to be honest. A scrim gets put up and we're told that we'll have to wait for our own deaths to see whether Nikita was disappointed or found there what he expected. Once I was teaching, and this goes into Saunders talking about his own work as a teacher. Once I was teaching a flawed but considerable Gogol story. Gogol's another Russian short story writer. I'm not sure if he wrote novels as well, to be honest. The story was called Nevsky Prospect, and a student said she didn't like it because it was sexist. I responded with a rare bit of teacherly wisdom by asking where, and she showed us exactly where by offering 2 examples of places where a character gets insulted. When a man was insulted, Gogol went into the character's head and we got to hear his response. When a woman was insulted, the third-person narrator stepped in and made a joke at her expense. Then I asked the class to imagine the story if Gogol had kept things fair by allowing the woman her own internal monologue. There followed a bit of silence and then a collective smile as we all at once saw the better story it could have been, just as dark and strange, but funnier and more honest. So yes, the story was sexist, but another way of saying this was it was a story with a technical flaw. The flaw was, or would have been had Gogol not been dead, correctable. The sexism my student identified was definitely there, and it was manifesting in a particular way in the text, in the form of inequitable narration. I'd say there's a general thesis in here somewhere. Any story, or we could say artwork, that suffers from what seems like a moral failing, that seems sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic, pedantic, appropriative, derivative, or another writer's work and so on, will be seen with sufficient analytic snooping to be suffering from a technical failing. And if that technical failing is addressed, it will become a better story. Saunders says always here. I'm not sure about this. I'm going to go, let's just read through Saunders here. Maybe we can think about this ourselves, how we feel about that. Here, an accusation we've been dancing around. Tolstoy seems to be exhibiting class bias. Gets converted by asking, where exactly? Into a neutral, more workable, technical observation. In at least 2 places when Nikita comes home from the hospital and in their respective death scenes, Nikita isn't denied the interiority that Tolstoy gave Vasily in similar moments. Now, a story as wonderful as Master and Man should be accepted with gratitude for all of the beautiful things in it, but it's kind of fun to poke at it just in an ornery spirit of technical exploration. So, can we imagine a version of the story where Tolstoy grants Vasily parallel moments of interiority? That version might start with a scene of him in the hospital just after his rescue, thinking, the Nikita we've come to know was wise to Vasily's tricks. He saw Vasily as fixed quantity, stubborn, self-centered, a lost cause, someone to be worked around and tolerated. What does Nikita think of Vasily now? Now, I'm going to stop reading here, because here Saunders, I think most people watching this, I want to pull out the principle, not necessarily the specific example, which Saunders goes on to explore here. But he does suggest to his students an interesting exercise, which is to rewrite this story, but giving Nikita the depth of interiority and therefore bringing out the depth of experience, and I guess treating him with the same respect, same ability to actually recognize that he is a full human with a full human experience, as Vasily did have in the original Tolstoy story. So the reason that I paused there, in terms of what Saunders says, which is that all stories that have this that may appear, for example, sexist or homophobic or whatever, that all of them just have that technical inability to jump into recognize the other in a full enough way. Is that I wonder if there is another type of story which is just purposefully racist or homophobic, sexist, whatever, and all the other complexities of mistreatment of the other that we might have, that one might have in their work. Anyway, I guess that could come back to the individual's lack of ability to see the other in full anyway, even before they start making their piece of artwork. Anyhow, right. I just wanted to say why I paused. So yeah, coming back to, I just want to just come back to that idea for me, which is something that when about 10 years ago, I did a creative writing MA, and some of the students, we were quite young at that stage. A lot of the students, I was 26 or 25 when I started. Some of the students were 19, 20. Now I think they're probably all post 20, but you know what I'm getting at. We were young. There was a lot of young people in that group, and some of them wanted to go on directly from the MA creative writing course to do a PhD. And I remember there was some resistance in the teaching faculty, or it felt perhaps like there was some resistance there, for such a young person to go and kind of finish their studies, to get that kind of highest level study that you could get in creative writing, essentially an art form. And I think for me, this touches somewhat on the principle that we've just been exploring, our inability to fully realise the complexity of other people in our work, which I think can come back often to how much life experience, or the things that we've gone through, that allow us to recognise, I guess just build something that we may simply call empathy, and an ability for understanding other people. There's a quote from one of my favourite writers, Juno Diaz, who I've talked about in some of my videos, and he, again, I'm going to skew the quote a bit, but basically he says something along the lines of, if you want to be a great writer, again we could substitute artist, you can study the technical side of things, and that may do a lot of reading, study the technical sidings, but go and get your heart broken in 10 different countries first, and we could substitute heartbreak for all the other kinds of deep human experiences that people experience. Then come back and and start writing deeply. Now, this is related for me to something that I always try and push with my videos, which is the important thing of not rushing into trying to create these big, perfect creative projects, and recognizing that our work will change over time and will reflect who we are at the time when we wrote it. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to round that off with that, with those thoughts there. I hope some people have enjoyed this video. I'm taking a short break on the main channel, but that doesn't. When I say short break, I'll be back early January. Yeah, thanks for following along. If you're around here, you know, you're supporting the channel in a big way of just, well, you obviously care about the work that's done here, and yeah, I want to respect you as that level of care that you've shown around the work, and I appreciate you for hanging out and being a part of this journey here. And yeah, with that said, as I say, I hope you're having a happy holidays. If you're having something that is more complex than that, or maybe could be deemed not happy, that's fine too. That's not abnormal. And that's as you've taught, that's a valuable experience too. But happiness too. So yeah, peace. Speak soon. And yeah, see you later.